Let me tell you something right now. You didn't just stumble out of that toxic relationship by accident. God himself pulled you out with the urgency of a fireman dragging a soul from burning flames, and you may not realize it yet, but heaven itself was involved in your deliverance. Because he knew if you stayed one moment longer, the fire would consume not only your peace, but your purpose. They thought they broke you, but in truth they were feeding off your strength. And when you left, you didn't weaken. You exposed the fact that they were never strong on their own. They were only propped up by the light God placed in you. Just as 1 Corinthians 10:13 reminds us that God will always provide a way of escape, your exit was not weakness, it was divine strategy. Because the Lord refused to let his chosen vessel drown in counterfeit love disguised as control. You thought it was heartbreak, but God was secretly birthing your breakthrough, redirecting your steps to a place where you will no longer be tolerated, but celebrated. Your silence now is like a trumpet in the spirit realm, shaking the very foundations of their false image. Every unanswered call, every ignored attempt to pull you back is a sword cutting through their illusions, and it terrifies them more than any confrontation ever could. They miss the control, not the connection. Because narcissists never love the way you love. They only hunger for power, and when God severed their grip, their mask began to rot before their very eyes. You were the mirror that reflected the best version of them, but when they shattered that mirror, they were left staring into the emptiness of their own deceit, and that's why they crumble in your absence. Isaiah 54:17 declares that no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and your very silence is proof of that promise. The lies they spread, the manipulation they planned, none of it prospers now because your absence is a storm they cannot contain. Understand this, you were the blessing, the covering, the intercessor on your knees when they were plotting against you. And the prayers you sent up often shielded them from consequences they should have faced long ago. But when God said enough, his hand of grace lifted, and their house of cards began to collapse. They didn't lose a person. They lost access. They lost fuel. They lost the favor that surrounded you, because your presence was their protection. And now without you, their false strength is rotting from the inside out. Romans 8:28 reminds you that all things work together for good to them that love God. And what looked like rejection was truly redirection into a season of elevation you never could have reached while chained to their manipulation. You gave more than they ever deserved. You bled to keep love alive, but God in his mercy pulled you from the addiction to their chaos before it devoured your destiny. The truth is this, your scars are sacred reminders of survival, not weakness, because you didn't just escape a relationship, you escaped spiritual bondage, and the proof is in your glow, in your renewed strength, in your unshakable peace that now exposes everything fake in their world. They post their smiles, they flaunt new victims, they pretend they've moved on. But Proverbs 28:1 says the wicked flee when no man pursues, and deep down they are running from the ghost of your silence, haunted by the realization that you were the real thing they will never touch again. You were too real for their shallow waters, too deep for their empty games, too faithful for their deceit. And now that grace is gone, they are choking on the smoke of the fire they started. What they call strength today is nothing more than an act, and the longer you walk in peace, the more their world crumbles without the anchor you once provided. Don't be fooled by the performance. They don't regret losing you out of love, they regret losing control, and their desperation is not a sign of repentance, but a hunger for access to what God has already sealed off. They will circle back with charm, promises, and apologies rehearsed like a play. But Matthew 7:16 says, "You shall know them by their fruit," and their fruit still rots under the mask. You see, narcissists aren't afraid of loneliness. They're afraid of losing the audience that made their performance believable. And now, without you clapping for their lies, the theater of their life is empty and silent. And what they fear most isn't your anger, it's your indifference. Because nothing terrifies a manipulator like a heart that has finally learned how to heal without them. So hear me. You didn't just survive. You resurrected. Because the version of you that begged for crumbs is gone, replaced by the version that dines at God's table where abundance flows and manipulation cannot enter. What they meant for harm, God used for good, just like Genesis 50:20 reminds us. And the very pain they inflicted became the soil where your destiny took root. They thought your loyalty had no expiration, but God flipped the script, declaring an end to the bondage and a beginning to your breakthrough. And now they watch from the shadows as you rise into the fullness of your calling. This is your holy vindication, not revenge, not bitterness, but peace, so radiant it blinds every demon that once used your tears as their weapon. And now you know the secret. Their collapse was never your fault. it was their consequence, because they built a life on lies, and used your love as the glue. And once the glue was gone, everything started to fall. They never anticipated your strength, they only planned for your weakness, and the shock that you walked away with your soul intact is a wound they cannot heal. You are no longer chained to their chaos, no longer drained by their deception, because God Himself has planted you in a season where manipulation can no longer breathe. This is not just recovery, it's destiny, it's purpose, it's the living fulfillment of Jeremiah 29:11, that His plans for you are for peace, not for harm, to give you hope and a future. So walk forward boldly, child of God, with your head lifted and your spirit unshaken, for you did not just survive a narcissist, you overcame the spirit behind them, and while they crumble in the shadows of your silence, you rise in the light of divine purpose, untouchable, unstoppable, unshakable, because greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. 1 John 4:4. This is not your ending, it is your holy beginning. And while they replay their loss and torment, you walk into a future where your peace is louder than their lies, your joy stronger than their control, and your glow brighter than their shadows. That is the victory, that is the testimony, and that is the proof. God didn't just pull you out to escape, He pulled you out so you could finally rise.